Have you ever heard of a strange family rule? One that's never explained, but you're told you must obey. In my house, there's one rule that still sends shivers down my spine. Whenever I think about it, never ever sleep in the living room on Wednesday night. They say that night is called the night of retribution. The question is, why Wednesday night and retribution from who? I never believed it before, until I experienced it myself. Before I begin this story, go ahead and write in the comments if your home also has strange rules that don't make sense, but you still follow them. Who knows, maybe we can compare notes. Long ago in a small village, nestled in the middle of misty hills, there was a rule that every single resident followed religiously. Never sleep in the living room on Wednesday night. It wasn't just some old superstition passed down. It was something sacred because they said anyone who broke it would never be the same. The next morning, the village was surrounded by old pine forests, whose branches whispered whenever the night wind blew. The narrow dirt roads turned eerily quiet after sunset, and the wooden houses glowed dimly under the yellow light of oil lamps. To outsiders, it looked like a peaceful, ordinary village, but to its residents, every Wednesday night was a night to be faced with a niece. The story began decades ago when a man named Surya, a carpenter in the village, was burned alive inside a house at the end of the road after being accused of committing an unspeakable crime. Ever since the night of his death, every Wednesday, people began to hear heavy footsteps on the road, followed by slow knocking on their doors. No one ever dared to open it because they believed it was Surya's spirit, searching for a new body to inhabit. The villagers believed the spirit would only enter a house whose door faced the main road, and if it found someone sleeping in the living room, where they could be seen directly from the front door, that body would become his until dawn. That's why on Wednesday nights, entire families would huddle together in their bedrooms, lock the doors from the inside, and even carry sleeping children away from the sofa. In that village, breaking the rule was as good as signing your own death warrant. But of course, there were always outsiders who thought it was nothing more than superstition. The clock on the living room wall showed exactly 11:00 p.m. Its hands moved slowly, accompanied by a tick-tick. Tick that seemed deafening in the silence. Maybe because the night was too quiet. Only one dim yellow bulb hung from the ceiling, flickering unsteadily. Its unstable light stretched the furniture's shadows into strange shapes. On the floor, the sofa looked like a hunchback. The old wooden table reflected the dim glow, like a pool of murky water, and the glass cabinet in the corner showed my own reflection, though for some reason, it looked slightly darker than it should. The air in the room was stale, mixed with the damp smell of rotting wood. Every breath I took carried fine dust into my throat, making me cough lightly now and then. I tried turning on the television for some company, but every channel showed nothing but static, white and black specks dancing frantically across the screen. The sound of static was like distant, heavy rain, but there was something strange in the middle of that noise. I could hear faint tones, like someone whispering very softly, though too unclear to understand. I picked up the remote and turned the TV off. Silence instantly filled the room, and in that silence I heard it. 3 slow, deliberate knocks coming from the window. At first, I thought it was just a tree branch swaying in the wind, but when I looked toward it, I remembered there were no trees on that side of the house. And that night, the air outside was completely still. Not even the crickets were chirping, as if every living thing had chosen to stay silent. I tried to shake off the fear, closed my eyes and steadied my breathing. But the knocking came again. This time a little louder, as if the knocker wanted to make sure I heard it. I stood up and began walking slowly toward the window, but stopped halfway when the knocking suddenly shifted. Now it was coming from the front door. I froze. The door was only about 10 feet from where I stood. The lamp's glow hit the frosted glass panel near the top, and I saw something. A dark shadow standing perfectly still. It was tall with a stiff posture. Its head slightly bowed, it didn't move. Not even a breath, not even a twitch. And then from behind the door came a raspy whisper. "Open, I'm home." The voice was close, too close. It didn't sound like someone speaking from outside the house. It sounded like a voice crawling right into my ear from behind the door itself. It was deep, rough, and strangely longing. But not the kind of longing that comforts you. This one was heavy, suffocating, pressing down on your chest. I took a small step back, but my eyes stayed locked on the shadow. A shadow that hadn't changed a bit since I first saw it. And as I stared, I began to notice something that made my skin crawl. The shadow didn't have clear human contours. The head was hazy as if wrapped in mist, but the body was pitch black, so dark it seemed to swallow the light around it. I swallowed hard, my heartbeat pounding so loud. I could hear it in my ears. Every instinct screamed at me to run to my bedroom, but my legs wouldn't move, frozen in place, and in that moment, the shadow began to move not much, just leaning forward slightly. But even that tiny motion was enough to make me realize, whatever it was, it knew I was watching, and it was waiting for me to come closer. The air in the living room suddenly felt heavy, as if a thick layer was pressing down on my entire body. Breathing became difficult. My heartbeat pounded so hard my ears rang. That's when I noticed the wall clock had stopped. At 11:44 p.m. there was no tick anymore. It was as if time in the room had frozen. The television I had turned off suddenly switched on by itself, filling the room with a storm of black and white static. But this time the sound wasn't the same. There was another noise inside it, a voice like someone muttering, quickly stammering, angry and incomprehensible. The more I tried to focus, the more I realized it didn't sound like human language at all. The ceiling light began to flicker slowly, then faster, as if it were about to go out. In those flashes of light, I caught something out of the corner of my eye, a long shadow crawling along the wall, moving toward me even though there was nothing that could possibly be casting it. Then, from the direction of the sofa, came a dragging sound. Scrape, scrape, like wet fabric being pulled across the floor. I turned my head and there she was. A woman stood behind the sofa, her body leaning forward, long black hair covering part of her face. Her clothes were tattered, soaked with dark stains that dripped onto the floor. Through the strands of hair, I could see her eyes hollow, lifeless but her lips. Those pale lips curved into a smile, far too wide for a normal human face. A smile that didn't show joy, but an unsettling kind of hunger. She started walking toward me, slowly dragging her feet. Each step left behind a trail of thick, black stains on the floor, like footprints made of mud mixed with blood. The metallic tang of blood began to fill the room, mingled with the rancid stench of meat left to rot for days. I tried to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor. My body was heavy, as if invisible hands were holding my legs in place. My breathing grew ragged the closer she came. The clearer I could hear a strange sound from her mouth, fast, jumbled murmurs, like someone speaking while swallowing something solid. In a panic, I shut my eyes tight, but that only made the sound of her steps even clearer. Scrape, scrape, followed by a long, drawn-out breath right in front of my face. The air from her mouth was icy and foul. I opened my eyes for just a moment. Her face was only inches away. Her mouth was wide open, her teeth jagged and broken, and in the back of her throat, I saw something moving, like small hands struggling to crawl out. Before I could scream, the entire room was swallowed in total darkness. The darkness lasted for I don't know how long. No sound, no light. Just a crushing weight on my chest, as if I were drowning in thick, murky water. Then slowly the sound of my heartbeat returned, followed by a bone-deep cold. When I opened my eyes, I found myself lying in my bedroom, blanket pulled over me with the pale light of dawn, slipping through the gap in the curtains. For a few seconds I just lay there, convincing myself that everything had been nothing more than a nightmare. I even almost let out a small laugh. telling myself it was just my brain playing tricks. But that relief didn't last long. When I got up and opened my bedroom door, a different kind of cold swept over my face. The living room was right in front of me, and what I saw froze my blood. The curtains were torn in long, jagged slashes as if something had clawed them. A chair was overturned, and the heavy wooden table, so heavy it took 2 people to move, had been shifted, almost blocking the hallway. But what truly made me freeze was the window. There, plain as day, was the imprint of a large, filthy, pitch-black hand. It wasn't like ordinary dust. The mark was so dark and greasy, it looked as though something from outside, or from another world, had touched it. And it wasn't just one print. There were 5, all pointing inward toward the house. The faint metallic stench still lingered in the air. I swallowed hard, pushing away the dark thoughts, and rushed to my mother's room. As I stammered through my story, she stayed silent, her face growing paler with each word. There was a pause, just a few seconds, but it felt like forever before she finally spoke, her voice low. "That's why you should never sleep in the living room." On Wednesday night, her tone was flat, but her eyes trembled, as if remembering something she wished she could forget. I gave a nervous laugh. "But Mom, I woke up in my bedroom, so I'm safe, right?" It was just a dream. She stared at me for a long moment, then shook her head. Her lips quivered before she spoke again. "If you woke up in your bed, that means she already came inside. And this time she decided to leave you." Her words made my blood run cold. One question burned in my mind. If she decided to leave me, then who did she take that night? And just as that thought froze in my head, from the living room came 3 soft knocks.